Kum len a blot gemara. Today's blot, which is Tuesday, is daf. Monday's blot is daf chav zayin. It says the Gemara. Talabam we learned. We're starting with the chav vav on the very bottom of the page. We're still talking about Avelis, and we're going to talk about Avelis till the very end of the Masechta. Talabam we learned ahaylech memakim lemakim. If somebody was traveling from one place to another, he was going on business, and then sometime during the trip, he found out that he was an avel. So, im yachol lemayit ba'asaka yemait. If he can reduce the work that he's doing, he should. The business that he's doing, v'im lav. If not, yigalgil iman. He should continue traveling with them and doing business in partnership. And Taisha already explains, we're talking about that it's a matter of a loss, a dover of it, because generally an avel is not allowed to work. But here we're talking about it's a dover of it. Or others say because he's in the middle of the trip and he's already in the middle, he can finish. Tanaban we learned. The aim of sign kaifin is hamitas. We discussed that we in the olden days they should turn the beds over, shouldn't be comfortable. But when do we turn the beds over? Now you notice nowhere did we learn anywhere that a person is not allowed to sit on a normal chair, that an oval, and you have to sit on a low chair. All we learned was that the beds are turned over. So we'll soon see. We learned from when do we start turning over the beds? As soon as you take the mace out of your house, that's when you have to start doing your mourning, and you turn the beds over. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Yeshua disagrees. He says, it's when you close the goel. And we have a number of times Rashi and Taisus arguing. According to Rashi, goel means the lid on the coffin. According to Taisus, it means the matzeva. Ma'aseh shemes Rabbi Gamliel Zaken. Rabbi Gamliel passed away. They say it's not Rabbi Gamliel Zaken, it's Rabbi Gamliel who lived in the time of Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Lezer. As soon as they took him out of the house, Rabbi Lezer came out and said, you have to start your avelas, turn the beds over. And once they put the matzeva on, or the lid of Rashi, so Rabbi Shua said, now it's time to start your avelas. They said,
Hello, anybody there? Hello?
Might have lost him.
We've lost Israel.
No, he left. He's going to come in again, probably. Yeah, it should be in now.
Sorry, I lost you.
Yeah.
So that is why the ovel has to change from his shoes right after they cover the coffin with sand. That's timas hagoel. Torah we learned. On Shabbos, there's no display of avela. So when do you turn the beds back up, standing? From mincha and onwards, and there's a big machlekes. Which mincha are we talking about? Are we talking about mincha gedolah, which is 12:30 in the afternoon, or we're talking about mincha ketana, which is 3:30 in the afternoon? And Amar Abba Bar Huna, Afa Pikeh. So that's when the oval starts preparing themselves for Shabbos, and even though it's still morning, but they can already do certain things for Shabbos. Amar Abba Huna, Afa Pikeh. Nevertheless, Einu Yoshev Aleh. He will not sit on those beds when they're upright until Shabbos, because he's still sitting in Avelis. Ulam Shabbos. Now let's say Sunday morning you're getting up. Shabbos. Even though it's Sunday morning you're getting up, you have to turn the beds back upside down. Now it says over here, the first time it says over here that you don't sit on them until, even though you stood the beds up from mincha onwards, you don't sit until Shabbos. This is the first time we're talking about generally sitting, that you don't sit on a normal chair during Avelis. So the beds are upright, you're not allowed to sit on it. So this is where we learn out the halacha that you have to sit on low stools and all that. When we learned how when we say they have to turn over your bed, how many beds you have to turn over? Not only your bed, all the beds in the house. Even though we have 10 beds, 10 different parts of your house, every single bed in the house had to be turned over. Let's say there were 5 siblings and one of them passed away. Every single sibling has to turn over all the beds in the house. If there was a bed that was mainly for storage, then it's not a bed for sleeping or for sitting, and therefore you don't have to turn it over. And a dargish, and the Gemara will tell us in a minute what a dargish is, so you don't have to turn it over. You leave it upright. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, dargish, when it comes to a dargish, which is a certain type of a bed, all you have to do is matir es kabita. There were ropes that were going from the frame, from one side of the frame to the other side of the frame, and that was what hold up. That was the bed. So all you have to do is untie the ropes, unravel the ropes, and then the whole thing falls apart. My dargish, what exactly is dargish? Amrullah. Arsa de Gada. They used to have, a bed in their houses, which was purely for good luck, to show that things are going well. They would have a bed that nobody slept on, nobody sat on. It was there purely for good mazel. And in Shulchan Aruch, the Shach there talks about whether it's a problem of whether, like, these good luck charms, is it like some kind of a kishuv thing, like menachish, and you shouldn't have it or not. But they used to have a bed for mazel. So that's what we're talking about. And that particular bed, Rav Shimon Lula says you have to untie the ropes, and good enough, and that's it. And Tanakama says that you can just leave it upstanding, because it's not a bed to sleep on. Rabbi said, I don't understand. If so, Gabi Melech by a king. Now we learned everyone sits on the ground, but who may sit on a dagish, and he sits on the dagish. Now, if this dagish was some kind of a bed for good luck that nobody sat on, so the king never sat on his bed, and suddenly now in Oval you make him sit on it. You can meet until nobody sat on this bed. We're going to make the king sit on his bed. Why would you do that? So Maskul Rashi said, I don't understand. What's the problem? My kusha. The other things that we do during Avelis that's not normal. For example, eating and drinking, right? It comes Avelis, the first meal that you have, according to some, all the meals of the first day, or at least the first meal. We have, it's called Sudas Havra, that somebody else gives you bread and eggs and all that. By the king as well. It's like common that some stranger would go and give the food to the king. But by Avelis you do. So why is it bothering you if the king has to sit on his bed for good fortune? That's generally used for good fortune. Nobody gave him to eat or drink. And now that he's in Avelis, they do give him to eat and drink. So what's bothering you? Eli Kasha, why can't there be a bed of good luck? Eli Kasha Hakasha. We learned Dargish ain't it says over here that a dargish you don't have to turn over. The Tanakama says you just stand it up. Now the arsa the god, if it's a bed of mazel, you should turn it over, because we learned hakoifa mitos. So let's look at the top of the page. If somebody turns the bed over, not only your bed, all the beds in your house have turned over, including this bed of Gada, which is for good luck. Says that bothers you? My kasha, what's the problem? We just learned before also that if you have a bed that's meant for storage, you don't have to turn over. When we say a bed you have to turn over, we're talking about a bed that you sleep on, not a bed that you use for other purposes. So this bed that was set aside, good luck, you don't have to turn over. So what's bothering you? The Tanya could be learned before the Bryce. If it was a bed that was purely designated to store kelim, you don't turn it over. Eli kasha hakasha. If you have a problem, this is my problem. Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Dargish matir kabita." When it comes to a dargish, you untie the ropes. Who neiful me'elav. It comes to a dargish, you untie the ropes and it falls apart. Now, the Isaac if we're talking about a bed of good luck, my karbitin is that what kind of ropes do you have over the? That's not the kind of bed it was. It's not a bed to sleep on. So that's our problem. So Kiyasa Ravin, when Ravin came along, a rabbi told him, but Tachlifa B'Marav. His name was Tachlifa, the son of Marav. He used to hang around the marketplace where the tanners used to be, and he said, "I know exactly what this bed is. What this dargish is. You know what dargish is? It's the bed that they use. These tannery made out of. It's made out of hide, and what they did was they used to travel with it." And when they traveled, and therefore they was able to take it apart. So it's a big piece of leather that covered the entire area within the frame. And when they were traveling, they would basically remove the leather and then have two frames there, and you fold it all up and take it with them as they traveled. Itmanam, we learned dargish is sibruga metoichi. The difference between a dargish and a bed was that a dargish, so you had this frame and you had this big piece of leather, and you had inside the frame, on the bottom part of the frame, you had these holes, and you would put the ropes of the leather through these holes, so they were like, you were sinking, it was like below the frame. A normal bed that had all of these ropes that were tied around the frame on top of it, and therefore it wasn't really portable. It was, you tied it very well all around. This one here was much easier. So mitzvah bed, tzidrugal gaba, you would tie around the frame. Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Acham Rabbi Shimon Levi, Allah said before that you just untie the ropes and it falls apart. Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Acham Rabbi Shimon Levi, a bed shenaklitel yaitzi, a bed they used to use that had a canopy, so it was an old bed, and then you had a piece, a vertical stick on both ends of the bed, right in the middle of the frame, and then they would drape over it some kind of, some kind of a canvas or material. It was like a teepee in a way, sort of. Anyhow, it was a cover, a canopy over a bed so they could sleep on. So how do you turn it over? Because it came to a point. So he says, "Mita shenaklitel yoitzin zoikfa." All you have to do is lift it up, and it's enough. Or put it on the side, and it's enough. Tell him we learned. Yoshan lagabi learned before already. Yoshan lagabi kisi. If he went to sleep, this Abba went to sleep in the olden days when they used to turn the bed over. If he went to sleep on a chair or gabi or diner on top of a big mortar, gedela, or gabakag, he slept actually on the floor, and you would think, wow, he slept on the floor. Isn't that painful? That's discomfort. So that should be good for an Abba. He did not fulfill his obligation. Which obligation? He did not fulfill the edict of turning your bed over and then sleeping on that. So you're allowed to sweep the floor. You're allowed to actually pour water over the dirt so that it should stay put. The base of the house of the mourner. You're allowed to wash your plates and your cups and tray. You're allowed to wash all of these things. These are just ordinary mundane activities, and therefore you're allowed to wash them, even though in the house of a novel. So you're allowed to wash, and containers and bottles the base of oval, house and oval. The aim of the end, but you should not bring eshamugmer besapsamim. You should not bring the psamim and different kinds of incense to the base of oval to the house of oval. Don't bring it in the first place. Saying what it's not so, but you don't make a bracha on this incense. You don't make a bracha. Psamim on the spices, the base of oval. So it seems from there, bruche who the you don't make a bracha. Aber you must say you do bring it. Says like kasha. That's not a question. Hub the base of Abel, hub the base of Nachman. Here is talking about the house of the Abel, the mourner, when the deceased is still there. If the deceased is still there, we allow you to bring the summon because there is some kind of a bad smell, and therefore we want to give cover to the mace, and we want to that it should you should dispel that bad smell. So we have the summon in the house of the mourners, where the mace is no longer there. We don't want summon. So the Mishnah continues, when you bring food to the house of the Abel, you don't bring it not on a tray, but and not in a big plate, a big bowl. A knain is like a kind of a tray that the top part of it was wide, and then it became narrower and narrower, so sort of like in a way like a filter or something, traps the bigger pieces and lets through the small pieces. These are all, fancier kinds of trays. Ela besalam, just use ordinary baskets. But we'll see why. Next thing is they used to make a special bracha when they had the meal. So they make a bracha by the meal. It's called birchas avelim. You don't do that by Moed. You don't do that in Chol Moed. I will Indian Bishura, but in Chalamay, you bury someone, they still make a road for the oval to go through, and everybody, wishes condolences. Umenachmin, and everybody, says Hamakim Yenachem Eschem Upaitrin Esarabim, and then he sent everybody to go home. Because Chalamoid, we don't want people to spend too much time in doing that. We don't want you to leave the coffin in the street during Chalamoid. You lay it up, you put it on the street, people will come congregate and they will make more eulogies, and we make eulogies on Yom Tov. So too a coffin of a woman, we don't leave it there long. Out of respect for the women, we should bury them straight away. Says the Gemara, Torah we learned. Body shining in the beginning, this is what it used to be. Depending on your commensurate to your financial status, that's the kind of tray they used to bring them food. So what happened was, but in the beginning, the rich people, all kinds of trays made out of silver, made out of gold. The ani and the poor, the poor would have baskets made out of willows that were peeled. Well, Yaniyim is Baishin. It was very embarrassing because there were a lot of people there and they saw how impoverished they were. Yiskinu made a special takana not to embarrass the poor. Everyone should use these simple trays, nothing fancy at all. They are the peeled willows. Out of respect for the poor. So now we're going to bring a few other examples. But it's showing the beginning, they used to drink in the house of the Abel, the meal of the Sudas Havro, when everybody comes and they give them food. So Ashidi, the rich people used to use a white glass. We're learning more Shabbos that white glass is very expensive. And Ani and the poor is colored glass, which is much cheaper. Ani is Baishan, very poor. Everybody saw that how poor they were. They decided they instituted everyone should use colored glass out of respect for the poor. But it's showing in the beginning, that when they used to bury someone, they used to do it on the bed, not inside a coffin, so everybody can see the mace. So the rich people, they would leave the mace's face uncovered. But the poor were so emaciated that they would cover their faces. And they showed him their face was blackened because of the famine. The poor were very embarrassed. The living poor who was staying there were very embarrassed. So they made it. They instituted everyone should be covered out of respect for the poor. But in the beginning, they used to bring out the rich people on the bed that we talked about before with a leather bottom, and the poor people were just just a flat bed. And again, the poor standing and watching were very embarrassed. They instituted everyone should use the same standard, kind of a coffin or a bed. They kveiden shalanim out of respect for the poor. But in the beginning, they would place the spice and incense tachas chole mayim. In other words, if somebody had problems with intestine and diarrhea, so they would put their kind of spice and incense to sort of dispel the bad smell. So what happened was all those people living around there had a similar, malady, were embarrassed. Everyone, we should place these spices under everybody, under this incense under everybody, so that nobody's embarrassed. Out of respect for those who are alive. But it's showing in the beginning of my bills that Kalim Agab and Nida's basis. If a woman passed away who was a Nida, everything she touched before she passed away, they used to put immerse in the mikveh. Well, Nida's Chayil Baish, other women who was alive were embarrassed. All women, the things that they touched the last few days, they were tablet, they kavaidan shal Nida's Chayil, so not to single out anyone. But it's showing in the beginning, Madbilan Agabi Zovin, Mason, same with males. The male was tummy, and was Zov. He had emissions, everything that he touched in the last few days, the last day or so, they would immerse in the mikveh. Well, you're Zovin Chayim is Baishin. Those that were alive with singing were embarrassed. Skinushi Madbilan Agabi Hako, that everyone. Before when they passed away in the last 24 hours, they would immerse in the mikveh, the things that they come in contact with, and they Kvaidan Shal Zovin Chayim, out of respect to the Zom Chayim. Another example. in the beginning that the expenses of a mace and taking out a mace and the expenses that they incurred was very difficult for the relatives, more than the death itself. The brother than more than death itself, the pressure. They had to find the money to put in a coffin and everything else and find a burial plot. What happened is, it happened on a number of occasions that the family just fled. They couldn't afford it. Came along who was a Nasi at that time, and he decided that he was going to, sort of like self-deprecate, and he was going to make sure that his own funeral, that he will wear shrouds that are very simple, so not to embarrass anybody in the future. But you have to be clear, he went out with white clothes, lots of information. Everybody that followed with white shrouds. The Eden today, Nog Alma, the world has a meaning. A piece of material, a canvas. The value of mezuzah is good enough. Nobody cares. And we have the same thing in other things like the Kurim as well. With the baskets that they bring, we make sure that everybody is exactly the same. Like we have Kriyas at Torah. It used to be that those who knew how to read, they read it themselves. Those didn't have about Torah. And then eventually we didn't want to embarrass everybody, so everybody has a Baal Korah who reads for them. Sorry. So you want further? I'm going to Papa says, Ein Moed Bifnei Talmid Chacham. Even though we just said in the Mishnah that Ein Manichas Mitzvah, we don't place a bed in the street in a Chalamoid because we don't want eulogies, but not when it comes to a Talmid Chacham, because you're allowed to eulogize a Talmid Chacham, even a Chalamoid. The Chosh came surely Chanukah and Purim, which is even easier than Chalamoid, because a Chalamoid you're not allowed to work unless you have a choice. In Chanukah and Purim you could. There are opinions that Purim also you're not allowed to have any Avelis, big Machlekes will show you that Purim and Chanukah are also considered like Chalamoid in that sense that the spirit is you shouldn't have any Avelis at all. When do we say you make a eulogy with Talmid Chacham and Chalamoid? If the mace, if the deceased is right there. If the deceased is not there, then you do not hold any eulogies on Chalamoid. When it's not so Rav Kahana something that Rav Zvid Nadoi Bipunar, Rav Kahana eulogized Rav Zvid in the Pumnar, not at all next to the mace. The mace wasn't there at all. So my answer is, even though when a puppy Yom Shmuel, they just found out that he passed away. Who give a fun of dummy, and therefore because they just found out and right away, they made a eulogy right down there. It's as if the mace was standing right there. Amarul, so she's talking about a spade in hesped. Alev. When it comes to a hesped, you bang your heart. But the chsiv it says in Pasuk. It says in Pasuk, that on the chest, they what do you call it? Shadayim Seifrim, they mourn, so therefore they bang themselves on the chest. Tipuach biyad. Tipuach is with the hand banging on the chest, and kilus with tipuach is that what do you call it? That so we have this. We have that the hesped is you bang your heart. Tipuach is when you clap your hands together, and kilus is berego when you bang with your feet. Tell about we learned. Hamekala is when you bang with your feet on the ground, you stamp your feet on the ground. Like colors, the sandal, don't do it if you're wearing a sandal because it's very dangerous. But the sandal is only it's very loose on your foot, and it could be dangerous. And we had a few cases in Gemara Shabbos where it caused all kinds of problems. Elabemanu, only if you wear a proper shoe. You can incur sakana. So the Gemara. Once the Abel waves his head, or he shakes his head, then the consolers cannot sit next to him. So in Shulchan means basically that you're not allowed to really have conversations. You're not allowed to initiate conversations. So we're having a conversation, and the Abel says we're not allowed to really talk too much. Shakes his head as if to say the conversation is over. Everybody should be smart enough just to wish him, condolences and weep. Rashi says it means here is that if you can see from his from his body movements that he accepts what happened right now, then that means in Nichim you were successful in consoling him and you don't have to stay there anymore. Everyone has to stand up before a nasi. If somebody's sitting in mourning, he doesn't have to stand up for a nasi passing by. Or if somebody's very sick, very ill, you don't have to stand up for a nasi passing by. Everyone else, while they're standing for nasi, they cannot sit down until somebody says, please sit. They don't have to wait to be told to sit down, because they don't even have to stand up in the first place. But if they did decide to stand up, they could just sit down whenever they're ready. On the very first day, he's not allowed to eat from his own bread, and that's what we have a sudas havra. People give you something to eat. If we have bread and egg. The Torah said to him, the Abisha said to Yecheskel that your wife is going to die, but I don't want you to sit avelis, and they spell out all of these things that Hashem said I don't want you to do, and that's how we're going to happen. Every other Abel has to do it. And one of the items were do not eat the bread. So we learn from here that so he said to Yecheskel, you should not eat bread from other people, which means. But everybody else, all other Avelim, that's what they do. They eat bread from other people. Rabbi Yosef, what they did was they exchange their meals with each other, and that's how they ate someone else's bread. When one of them was an Avil, they just gave them a meal. If let's say there's somebody passed away in the city, somebody passes away, everybody in the city has to stop working. So Gemara tells the story of equal the Musa once came to a city to the Rumsa, and Shama Koshipura the Shachar. He heard the sound of a shofar. They announced that somebody passed away. Chazi saw Hanach Inchi. He saw a number of people of the Avir to continue to work as if nothing happened. Amaluhu, he said, he got angry. Lehevi Hanach Inish Bishamta. All of these people who are working right now should be placed in Chayran. Isn't there a corpse lying here in the town that you have to occupy yourself with, make sure they get buried? Amrulay told them, we have a Chaver Kadisha who takes care of that. Amru, he said, so I will release you from the Chayr. So this is talking about generally throughout the day. But during the actual Levaya, it says during the actual Levaya, you have to close, stop working. I was covered from Levi, not so much because to make sure the person gets buried, because I was covered for the Levi itself. And we learned before that you even stop learning, but that's only for a Chacham, and you shut down the Chacham's Beis HaMedrash. This is a very important rule. Kol hamiskashe al meisa yosem medai. If anybody does excessive mourning, al meis acharaboicha, what's going to happen is it will lead into another meis. If you have excessive mourning, then it leads to that you'll be punished, that you're going to have more meisim in train. And for example, Huitza was a woman. The Havi Beshiva said to Rav Huna. There was a woman that lived in the neighborhood of Rav Huna. Havel Shiva Bani. She had 7 sons, Meis, or 7 children. Meis Chadmanai, one of them died. Havel Kabachya be Allah, she just continued crying and couldn't be consoled. Shalach Rav Huna. Rav Huna sent her a message. They said, don't do that. Don't cry to such extent. She refused to listen. Shalach, he sent her another message. Itzai says, Muti, listen to me, it's all good. But Vilay, if not, if not, you're going to have more kids joining the first one. At the end, all of her 7 kids passed away. L'seifam, he sent another message and says, stop preparing your trip as well, because you're going to join them. But Misa, and she passed away. Because the idea is that we have to have a Mona, the Eibishter knows everything what he's doing. I mean, there's one explanation. The Eibishter, everything is with a cheshbon, and if you cry, of course it's very sad, everything else, you're supposed to mourn. But if you cry excessively, that means you're not accepting what the Eibishter did, and that is a problem. And that's why the Rebbe, we said throughout the Avelis, you shouldn't go overboard in not doing things because you're a novel, because it's exactly, you're harming that neshama. And how you could, based on, I would think it's based on this Gemara right here. You're not allowed to have excessive mourning. Says the Gemara further. Al tivku lemeis You should not cry for a mace. Ba'al tunudulai. Artificial mace means of course you have to cry, but don't cry excessively. Ba'al tunudulai, and therefore don't shake, is make a share more than normal. I guess they used to shake the head, and how awful it is, but everything with its limitations. Ha-Ketzad. So this is how it's supposed to be. Shloisha Yom Lebechi. The first 3 days of Shiva is basically when you cry and in a way you have closure. The Shiva Lehesped, and 7 days is for mourning, and Shloishim, and then 30 days Legiyas is his wife taking a haircut and for ironing, and washing your clothes a certain way and pressing the kavet we are in. What are you saying, that you have more compassion than I do? I let this person die, and as if I was, some kind of a callous relationship and involved my subjects, and I just let them die. That's what you're saying. So you have to, I guess, in a way, accept whatever the Eibusha is, as terrible as it is a cheshbon. Then the pasuk says, after that, it says, don't cry to a mace, which we just said means excessively, and don't shake your head excessively. Then it says, bochai lahaylich, cry for the one that is going. And then the pasuk says, because he won't return anymore and see the birthplace, his birthplace. So let's see what the pasuk means. Amar Rav Yehuda, lahaylich b'leibonim, said bochai, the one who's going. We don't mean just going to heaven. We mean somebody's going on their own, with no children, and they didn't bear any children during their lifetime. So that's very, very sad, and therefore it's a double crying that the person passed away, and crying that there's no legacy because there's no children anymore left for him. Says the Gemara. Abshuma Levi generally never went to anybody's house, to which condolences. Only somebody who left this world without any children whatsoever. The Chesiva says, he cried for somebody who left this world without any children. You won't come back. They won't come back and see the land that he was born in, because he had little children either. Rav Huna says, I have a different interpretation of the pasuk. You know what I mean? Lahaylich, going and not coming back. Somebody committed a sin and repeated it again. Rav Huna consists of the view we had before as well. The Rav Huna says that by doesn't obey and repeats it, hutruloi became permitted. And we ask, hutruloi, what? Because you repeated the same sin twice, are you allowed to do it? He treats it, because once you get accustomed to doing Avera, you no longer feel guilty, and he starts, it's much easier. The second time, much easier than the first time. Omar Levi said, first 3 days, Yides Atzmai, the first 3 days of a very close member of your family never passed away. You have to feel that the Malachamavas, the sword, is still out there, and you have to be very, very careful. The next 4 days, it's sitting in the corner, it's still very dangerous. The Malachamavas did something to your family, you have to be careful. Beyond that, is connected as if the Malach Mavas is distant from you, and the Rishonim say this goes on for 12 months. Okay, we'll stop over here. Tomorrow, Tuesday, there's no shir, and